Thursday morning, March 23rd, 7:15 a.m. The spring sun cast long shadows across downtown St. Louis as Midtown Federal Bank prepared for another routine business day. Branch manager Patricia Morrison arrived with her usual punctuality, coffee in hand and keys ready to begin the morning vault procedures that had become second nature after 12 years in banking. But something was wrong. Before we get into how Darren vanished with $12.6 million under every camera in the bank, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment your theory below. Was this the perfect inside job? Let's break it down. The security panel in the main lobby showed amber warning lights instead of the steady green indicators that should have signaled normal overnight operations. The surveillance monitors displayed frozen timestamps from 2:06 a.m., and the vault access log showed anomalies that made Patricia's stomach drop with instant dread. She immediately called for backup. Within minutes, Vault Operations Manager Michael Torres and Security Supervisor Janet Hayes joined her in the basement-level vault corridor. Following emergency protocols, the three-person team approached the massive steel door of Midtown Federal's main vault, a chamber that should have contained $12.6 million in freshly delivered currency awaiting redistribution into ATM networks across the metropolitan area. The vault's electronic locks showed no signs of tampering. The biometric scanners displayed normal operational status. The time delay mechanisms had functioned exactly as programmed. But when the 3-ton steel door swung open with its characteristic hydraulic whisper, they found themselves staring into a nightmare. Empty cash storage units lined the vault's interior walls. Vacuum-sealed currency bundles that had been meticulously organized the previous afternoon were simply gone. Security seals lay cut but undamaged on the floor. Transport containers sat open and hollow. Their contents vanished without a trace. $12.6 million had disappeared during the night shift, apparently without triggering a single security alert. But perhaps most disturbing of all was what they didn't find. Night security guard Darren Cole. His shift had ended at 6 a.m., but his uniform hung neatly folded in his assigned locker. His security badge sat on his desk, and his vehicle remained parked in the employee lot with the key still in the ignition. Darren Cole had vanished along with $12.6 million in federal currency, leaving behind no evidence, no witnesses, and no explanation for how one trusted employee had apparently executed the most sophisticated bank robbery in St. Louis history. Within hours, the FBI would classify this as one of their highest priority financial crimes investigations. Within days, it would become clear that Darren hadn't just stolen money. He had disappeared into thin air with the precision of someone who had spent months planning not just the perfect crime, but the perfect escape. This is the story of how a quiet, reliable night security guard used his access, his military training, and his intimate knowledge of bank operations to commit what investigators would later call one of the most technically sophisticated inside jobs in modern banking history. Darren James Cole was exactly the kind of employee that banks dream of hiring for their security operations. At 48 years old, he possessed a combination of military experience, technical competence, and personal reliability that made him seem like the perfect candidate to protect millions of dollars in cash and financial instruments. Born in rural Missouri, Darren had enlisted in the Marine Corps immediately after high school graduation in 1994. His military career spanned 12 years and included deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, where he specialized in logistics operations and secure facility management. His service record was exemplary. Multiple commendations, steady promotions, and expertise in exactly the kind of high-security operations that civilian banks required. After his honorable discharge in 2006, Darren transitioned into private security work, initially with companies that provided services to military contractors and government facilities. His background in secure logistics and facility protection made him highly sought after in an industry where trustworthiness was literally worth millions of dollars. Midtown Federal Bank hired Darren in January 2021 after a comprehensive background check that revealed no criminal history, stable employment patterns, and sterling references from both military and civilian supervisors. His psychological evaluation indicated someone who was detail-oriented, emotionally stable, and well-suited for the solitary responsibility of overnight security operations. For over 3 years, Darren had worked the night shift at Midtown Federal with perfect attendance and flawless performance reviews. He arrived at 10 p.m., conducted security rounds every hour, monitored surveillance systems, and maintained detailed logs that demonstrated his conscientious attention to duty. Bank executives considered him a model employee and had recently discussed promoting him to security supervisor. Darren lived alone in a rented single-wide trailer in Florissant, a working-class suburb about 20 minutes north of downtown St. Louis. Louis. Neighbors described him as quiet but friendly, someone who kept to himself but was always polite when encountered during his irregular schedule of sleeping during the day and working at night. His personal life was simple and unremarkable. He drove a 15-year-old Toyota Camry, shopped at discount grocery stores, and maintained a modest lifestyle that seemed well within his means on a security guard's salary. He had no wife, no children, no apparent debts, and no expensive habits that might indicate financial pressure or desperate circumstances. What bank executives and FBI investigators would later discover, however, was that Darren's military background included specialized training in exactly the kinds of security systems, logistical operations, and tactical planning that would be required to execute a sophisticated bank robbery from the inside. During his Marine Corps service, Darren had been responsible for managing secure supply chains that moved millions of dollars in equipment and materials through hostile territory. He had worked with electronic security systems, understood surveillance technology, and possessed detailed knowledge of how to exploit vulnerabilities in even the most sophisticated protective measures. More significantly, Darren's military experience had taught him how to plan and execute complex operations while maintaining operational security that would prevent detection by hostile intelligence services. These skills, originally developed to protect American military assets, had apparently been adapted for very different purposes. The psychological profile that FBI behavioral analysts would eventually develop suggested that Darren represented a new category of criminal, the highly trained insider who possessed both the access and the expertise necessary to defeat security. Systems designed to prevent exactly the kind of crime he would eventually commit. But in March 2024, none of these red flags were apparent. Darren Cole was simply a trusted night security guard who showed up for work, did his job with quiet competence, and had never given anyone reason to question his loyalty or integrity. Until the night he didn't. The theft of $12.6 million from Midtown Federal Bank wasn't a crime of opportunity or desperation. It was the culmination of months of careful observation, technical analysis, and strategic planning that exploited a narrow window of vulnerability in the bank's security operations. Wednesday, March 22nd, had been designated as a routine maintenance day for the bank's backup security systems. These monthly procedures involved temporarily shutting down redundant surveillance and alarm systems, while technicians verified that all components would function properly in case of primary system failures. The maintenance window was scheduled for 2 a.m. to 3 a.m., during the quietest period of the overnight shift when bank operations were minimal and the risk of customer disruption was non-existent. During this hour, backup cameras would be offline, auxiliary alarm sensors would be inactive, and security monitoring would rely entirely on primary systems that were normally considered adequate for overnight protection. But Darren had spent months studying these maintenance procedures and had identified critical vulnerabilities that bank security designers hadn't anticipated. The primary surveillance system included automatic data overwrite functions that deleted older footage to prevent storage capacity problems. During backup system maintenance, this process accelerated, creating brief periods when security footage might be permanently erased before it could be archived. More importantly, the scheduled maintenance occurred on the same day that Midtown Federal had received its largest cash delivery of the month. The Federal Reserve had delivered $12.6 million in mixed-denomination currency that afternoon, preparing for weekend ATM replenishment operations throughout the St. Louis metropolitan area. The timing wasn't coincidental. Darren had studied the bank's cash management procedures for nearly 2 years and had identified this monthly pattern as the optimal target for anyone with inside access to the vault systems. The money would be present, accessible, and wouldn't be missed until the following morning's redistribution procedures began. Access to the vault required two-factor authentication, a physical key card and a 6-digit access code that changed monthly. Under normal circumstances, only the vault operations manager and the security chief possessed both elements of the authentication system. However, emergency procedures allowed the overnight security guard to access the vault in case of fire, flood, or other catastrophic events that might threaten the facility. Darren had legitimate access to the emergency override codes, but using them would normally trigger immediate alerts to bank management and law enforcement. However, he had discovered that during backup system maintenance, these alert functions were temporarily disabled to prevent false alarms caused by system diagnostic procedures. The final element of Darren's plan involved the bank's physical cash storage systems. The $12.6 million delivery was stored in portable transport containers designed for armored car transfers, rather than the permanent vault fixtures used for long-term cash reserves. These containers could be moved quickly and efficiently by someone with knowledge of their handling procedures and access to appropriate transportation. Darren had spent weeks studying the delivery schedules, transportation methods, and storage procedures used by the bank's cash management operations. He knew exactly when large deliveries would arrive, how they would be stored, and when they would be most vulnerable to theft by someone with inside access. The convergence of scheduled maintenance, maximum cash reserves, and minimal oversight created a 30-minute window of opportunity that might occur only once or twice per year. Darren had been patiently waiting for these exact conditions, and on the night of March 22nd, everything aligned perfectly. But the most sophisticated aspect of Darren's preparation wasn't technical, it was psychological. He had spent months establishing patterns of behavior that would provide cover for any unusual activities during the crucial night. His reputation for thorough security procedures meant that extended periods in restricted areas wouldn't seem suspicious. His military background provided a plausible explanation for his detailed knowledge of security systems and emergency procedures. By 2 a.m. on March 23rd, Darren Cole was ready to execute what would become one of the most precisely planned bank robberies in FB1 history. He had identified the vulnerability, prepared his methods, and waited for the perfect opportunity to steal $12.6 million without anyone realizing a crime was being committed until it was far too late to stop him. At exactly 2:06 a.m. on March 23rd, Darren Cole made his final security log entry as a legitimate employee of Midtown Federal Bank. The notation read, "Beginning scheduled facility inspection, Sector 7, indicating his movement toward the vault level for what appeared to be routine security procedures." 5 minutes later, at 2:11 a.m., the vault's access log recorded an authorized entry using emergency override codes. The system showed normal authentication, standard door operation, and no security alerts. To any casual observer reviewing the electronic records, it would appear that the overnight security guard was conducting legitimate emergency procedures during the scheduled maintenance window. Inside the vault, Darren worked with the mechanical precision of someone who had rehearsed every movement countless times in his imagination. The $12.6 million in Federal Reserve currency was stored exactly where his reconnaissance had indicated, organized in transport-ready containers that could be moved efficiently by a single person with appropriate equipment. Darren had prepared for this moment by modifying standard bank equipment that was normally used for internal cash transfers. A maintenance cart typically used for cleaning supplies had been retrofitted with hidden compartments and reinforced wheels capable of supporting extreme weight loads. Security cameras would record nothing more than a routine maintenance procedure. Working methodically, Darren transferred the currency containers from their vault storage locations into his modified cart. The entire process took 23 minutes, during which he maintained the appearance of conducting legitimate security procedures while systematically removing $12.6 million in untraceable federal currency. The vault's electronic systems recorded the door closing at 2:39 a.m., with all authentication procedures completed normally. Darren's final log entry, made at 2:41 a.m., noted Sector 7 inspection completed, all systems normal. The maintenance cart was returned to its storage location, now empty but showing no external signs of its temporary cargo. But Darren's most sophisticated technique involved the manipulation of surveillance footage during the critical period. Using knowledge gained from his military experience with electronic systems, he had identified a method for creating a continuous loop of normal activity that would overwrite the actual footage of his theft. The surveillance system recorded Darren conducting apparently routine security patrols during the entire theft period. Cameras showed him walking normal rounds, checking doors and windows, and maintaining the kind of vigilant security presence that bank executives expected from their overnight staff. The footage appeared completely authentic and would pass casual inspection by security supervisors. By 3 a.m., when the backup systems came back online and normal security monitoring resumed, Darren had successfully stolen $12.6 million without triggering any alarms, alerts, or suspicion. The crime had been committed during a carefully chosen window of vulnerability, using legitimate access and insider knowledge to defeat security measures designed specifically to prevent inside jobs. The final phase of the theft involved preparing for Darren's immediate departure from the bank and the beginning of his permanent disappearance. At 3:15 a.m., he placed his security uniform in his assigned locker, changed into civilian clothes, and prepared to abandon the life he had maintained for over 3 years. Darren's car remained in the employee parking lot, keys in the ignition, and personal belongings undisturbed, creating the impression that he had simply vanished during his shift. But surveillance cameras in the rear alley recorded a gray delivery van departing the area at 2:44 a.m., exactly the time window when Darren would have been completing the final phases of his operation. At 4:05 a.m., airport security cameras captured footage of a man matching Darren's description, purchasing an airline ticket using false identification. The destination was deliberately obscured in the footage, but flight records would later suggest connections through multiple cities that could have taken him anywhere in North or South America. By dawn, Darren Cole had completed what federal investigators would later classify as one of the most technically sophisticated bank robberies in modern history. He had stolen $12.6 million using insider access, military-trained operational security, and timing so precise that the crime wasn't discovered until 7 hours after its completion. The theft demonstrated that the most dangerous threats to banking security came not from external criminals using force or sophisticated technology, but from trusted insiders who possessed both access and expertise necessary to defeat even the most advanced protective systems. Darren Cole's escape plan demonstrated the same meticulous attention to detail that characterized his vault robbery. Unlike most bank thieves who flee in panic and leave behind trails of evidence, Darren had spent months preparing a disappearance strategy designed to provide maximum time before detection and the best chance of permanent evasion. The gray delivery van captured on surveillance cameras departing the bank's rear alley at 2:44 a.m. was found 3 miles away in an industrial area, completely burned and stripped of all identifying evidence. Fire department investigators determined that the blaze had been set using an accelerant designed to destroy forensic evidence, suggesting sophisticated understanding of police investigative procedures. The van had been purchased 6 months earlier using false identification and cash payments that couldn't be traced to Darren's legitimate identity. Registration documents led to a fictitious address and forged driver's license information that demonstrated advanced preparation for the escape phase of his criminal operation. Airport surveillance footage showing Darren at 4:05 a.m. provided the last confirmed sighting of him before his complete disappearance. The ticket was purchased using the identity Robert Martinez, supported by apparently authentic identification documents that passed airline security screening procedures. Flight records indicated that Robert Martinez boarded a 5:30 a.m. flight to Dallas, where he had a brief layover before continuing to a destination that FBI investigators have never been able to definitively establish. The sophistication of his false identity suggested connections to professional document forgers or extensive research into identity fraud techniques. But the most revealing aspect of Darren's escape planning was discovered at his trailer home in Florissant. The residence had been systematically prepared for abandonment, with personal belongings sorted, important documents destroyed, and financial accounts closed weeks before the theft occurred. Neighbors reported that Darren had been cleaning out his home for several weeks, claiming he was preparing to relocate for a new job opportunity. He had sold most of his furniture, canceled utility services, and paid all outstanding debts in cash, creating a clean financial footprint that would be difficult for investigators to trace. The FBI's financial forensics investigation revealed that Darren had been methodically liquidating assets and accumulating cash for nearly 6 months before the theft. Bank records showed systematic withdrawals, the sale of personal property, and the conversion of retirement accounts to untraceable currency. Computer analysis of Darren's personal devices found only thoroughly wiped equipment with no recoverable data. His internet browsing history had been professionally deleted, and his email accounts had been closed and purged using techniques that suggested advanced understanding of digital forensics and electronic surveillance methods. International law enforcement agencies were notified within hours of discovering the theft, but extensive investigation revealed no evidence that Darren had attempted to leave the United States through official border crossing points. Immigration records for both Mexico and Canada showed no departures matching his description or any of his known aliases. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit predicted that Darren would avoid international travel and instead disappear domestically, using his false identities and military training to establish a new life in a location where his skills would be valuable. But his presence wouldn't attract attention. 6 months after the theft, credible sightings were reported in Nevada, Panama, and Costa Rica. But extensive investigation by international law enforcement agencies failed to confirm any of these reports. The trail had gone completely cold, and Darren appeared to have successfully vanished into the vast anonymity of either the American landscape or international expatriate communities. The $12.6 million in stolen currency remained missing and untraceable. Unlike marked bills or currency with recorded serial numbers, the Federal Reserve delivery contained mixed denomination notes that would be virtually impossible to identify once introduced into normal commercial circulation.